Access Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Let's just look at economics a little bit more. We've had another brush with a blowout, at least of the European banking system, and this is the case of the Austrian zombie bank, Hypo Alpe Adria, Hypo Alpe, A-L-P-E-A-D-R-I, of Klagenfurt, Klagenfurt being in the south Austrian area of Carinthia, or Canton, the land of Jörg Haider, the anti-European Union, anti-Eurogok right-wing populist who, by all indications, was murdered about a year ago by the Eurogorks because of the threat that he posed to them. Excellent book by Gerhard Wisniewski, for those of who can read German, that lays out the case that this was, in fact, a political assassination. It's a very mysterious and strange automobile accident, allegedly, in reality, most likely political assassination. The Hypo Alpe Adria Bank had assets of 40 billion euros. It was active in the Balkans, Croatia, Serbia, Slovakia. It has now been seized, nationalized by the Austrian authorities. This is a guy called Novotny, who's the head of the Austrian Central Bank, and he did this working together with Jean-Claude Trichet, the oligarch, Eurogork, who heads the European Central Bank. There's an interesting conflict. The Hypo Alpe Adria was a branch of the Bavarian State Bank, Bayern Landesbank, also a troubled institution. So there's a kind of tug-of-war between Berlin and Vienna about who should pay. We've got the end of TARP coming on now, and as we heard perhaps in the news, Obama is scrambling to get left cover. Remember, whenever Obama's poll numbers collapse, as happens quite often now, he tries to pull out this card of economic populism and anti-Wall Street sentiment. But who believes him? This interview where he says, the fat cats, the bankers are fat cats who don't get it, and they need to give up their bonuses. Well, look at the reality. I think it's interesting to point out Rush Limbaugh and these characters love to attack what Obama says, but they love to attack to ignore what he does. They attack what he says and ignore what he does, because of course what he does is the action of a Wall Street puppet. And it's not possible for Limbaugh to get up there and say, Obama, you're a Wall Street puppet, you're a union buster, you're a tool of finance capital, because that's much too close to home and much too close to what Limbaugh himself really is, this protege of William Buckley and the right-wing CIA, who was anointed by Henry Kissinger at the beginning of his demagogic career. If you look at what Obama's actually doing, of course, his financial re-regulation is a joke, and obviously the policies are in great disarray. Now, Time magazine has named Bernanke as Man of the Year. Well, it's time to deny Bernanke his reappointment. It's time to begin the process of nationalizing, seizing the Fed, either all at once if you can, or piece by piece. Will the Shill, George Will, is very upset about the plan to audit the Fed. He says that if you have frequent audits of the Fed, this could be used to signal dissatisfaction with monetary policy, and therefore this is something that cannot be done. I think the audit makes sense. The Ron Paul and indeed Bernie Sanders and indeed DeMint approaches to this are just what you need, provided that you understand this as a progression towards the nationalization, not the abolition, because that would simply return power to J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, and the zombies of Goldman Sachs, but the nationalization so that you can make the transition from federal spending to federal lending. Federal lending is what we need. 0% U.S. credit for production only, and production means industry, agriculture, energy production, concrete physical infrastructure, scientific research, mining, and other hard commodity, tangible physical production. So this is the issue. Moody's is threatening the AAA status of U.S. debt. I would suggest that the United States government should shut down Moody's. You could easily make a case for all kinds of financial crimes against Moody's in the way that they ignored the derivatives bubble last year. They should have been put out of business a long time ago. In the light of the hypocrisy coming from the Limbaugh, Hannity, Levin brigade, I'd just like to remind people of one thing. Ronald Reagan, their demigod, tripled the U.S. public debt. He tripled it. The Great Reagan Revolution with tax cuts and all this other claptrap was, on the one side, one of the biggest wealth redistributions from the poor and the middle class to the rich and the financier oligarchs. But above all, from the issue of deficits and public debt, which the reactionaries are now attempting to trot out, Reagan tripled the public debt. He was the greatest state bankrupteur d'etat, that we've ever had in American history, because no matter what Obama does, he'll never succeed in tripling. Well, he may. If we get into hyperinflation, he may actually do it. But it's going to take something for anybody to match the feat of the Gipper, the great communicator, who tripled the national debt, the existing public debt, from 1776 until Reagan. By the time he got out, it was 3 times that amount. Remember, Cheney said, Reagan proved to us that deficits don't matter. That's Republican orthodoxy. Borrow and spend is the Republican line. And you teabaggers out there, don't be duped. Don't let those guys like Dick Armey and his gang do to you what Obama did to the leftists last year. Don't be duped. We have Judd Gregg out there saying, oh, all these things have to be paid for. Yeah, this is Judd Gregg. He discovered this orthodoxy late in life, right after he was voting for the Iraq War and everything else, without any idea of how it would be paid for. And, of course, the bailout. And remember, in terms of the bailout, look at all those Republicans who voted for the odious TARP, the bailout of the Wall Street zombie bankers. That included McCain, who threw away his presidential chances, and, of course, Palin, who spoke in favor of the bailout. Palin supported the bailout. So I'm afraid these are very weak reeds to lean on. So the economic crisis goes on and on. We're now about a month after Dubai, and we've now got this Hypo Alpe Adria case. That indicates that we're headed into more tempests in 2010 than most people think. Now, let's also look at this Copenhagen monstrosity. Copenhagen seems to be sinking into a chaos of counter gangs and demagogy. There is, of course, a big push by the climate ghouls and the genocidalists there to try to get some kind of general political framework commitment, even if it's only an executive agreement, done by the end. But maybe they won't succeed. We'll be back in a minute.